Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me here on my channel for another Celestron Origin video. Today I'm going to show you everything from start to finish on how I do my personal post-processing. Now, of course, with PixInsight and all the different post-processing programs out there, you can spend hours and hours and hours learning all the intricacies about post-processing and fine-tuning your images to the very best of your ability. Personally, I edit my photos just to where they look natural to me. A lot of people like to spend a lot more time getting just that last 10% or so out of their photos, and I'm just not like that. So this tutorial is a little bit more of a basic tutorial, and it should be easy for you to follow along. I do want to preface that I do have some aftermarket stuff installed in my PixInsight. It is not just a stock version of software. I do have the RC Astro suite of the Blur Exterminator, Star Exterminator, and also Noise Exterminator. I also have the SETI Astro files all inserted and a few others, and I'll link all those down in the description if you'd like to download those yourself. And let's get right on into a full post-processing workflow. All right, let's get right on into doing some post-processing with our Celestron Origin data. Now, my personal preference is I like to use the serial script written by Rich Stevenson. If you don't know that script, I'll have a link in the description of this video that you can go check out the script and download it and install it into your version of Serial. And it just makes everything with the Origin data really quick and simple, and it really adds a lot of value to doing the post-processing in a timely manner. Of course, if you don't use the script, you can use Deep Sky Stacker, you can use Astro Pixel Processor, you can use PixInsight itself with its stacking algorithm. You have many choices, and whether or not you're Windows or Mac, that is up to you and which way you want to approach this. Now, as you see here on my screen, we've got the image of the Helix Nebula that we're going to be doing the post-processing on today. I do have my icons over here to the side. These are just some quick process icons that I downloaded from Luco Matico's video on his basic tutorial for beginner post-processing as well. I'll also have a link to that video in my description that you can go check out that. This is a very similar workflow to his. This is just geared towards the Origin data versus his with his telescope in particular. First thing we're going to do on this data of the Helix Nebula is perform a screen transfer function that basically gives us a preview of what the image sort of looks like. You can either approach it by going to Process and then All Processes and scroll all the way down till you see Screen Transfer Function right here. I just have it over here as just a little quick file. You just double click it and it pulls right up. If we hit this little button that looks like an alarm button, you can see there's our Helix Nebula. It's kind of flipped upside down. We do have this circular pattern of noise all the way through the image. Of course, this is taken in altazimuth mode, and this is really reminiscent of the type of data or the image result that you probably can expect. Now, a couple things to note about your data when you look at the Origin. You're going to see this noise pattern, but you're also going to notice these edges, especially in altazimuth mode. You see this edge here is kind of really pixelated, kind of weird. And then also right here, it's also kind of pixelated weird as well. We're going to fix that when we crop the image here in just a second. But for now, this is what we can basically look at. We see the stars over here by zooming in have decent color, some blues, some whites, and some nice yellow colors. We see that the Helix itself has some good rainbow colors to it. So we got a lot of the natural color from the Helix, which is really cool. And we're going to move on to the next step. You're going to want to keep this open. So I would just suggest using this little button here that just minimizes it and just push it up a little bit. Second step on the journey here for post-processing, we're going to do a dynamic crop. So I'm going to try to avoid my quick icon buttons over here just because a lot of people aren't going to be using these. You yourself are going to be using them. You can create icons. There's lots of videos on YouTube and a lot of the forums that show you all kinds of videos how to create your icons and put them onto your little desktop here that you can just quickly add and subtract things that you need. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to go off of the good old-fashioned way. So we're going to find dynamic crop. That's our next selection that we're going to be doing. And you'll notice that dynamic crop pops up, a bunch of different parameters that you can insert. We don't need to do any of that. For my particular unit, all we need to do is just drag and drop to what we want it to be. So in this case, I'm going to try to avoid those edges a little bit. I want to keep the Helix kind of centered, so I'm going to maybe crop it a little bit further and then move the image down just a little bit. like this. I want to center up the helix though. You can go to the edges a little further if you choose, but just for this demonstration, because all four corners here do have some artifacts from the altazimuth rotation, we're going to want to try to avoid that. So once you have the field of view that you want to crop, you're going to go over here on this dynamic crop and hit the little green check mark. It is going to crop our image. You can see there that it got rid of the edges, and you can hit the X button and close dynamic crop completely. Now we are ready to move on to the next thing, which is going to be background extraction. One thing I would highly suggest you do is download Grexpert. This is a free program on Windows and Mac. It allows you to get rid of the background gradients on your Astro images. So for this one, we're going to go under Process, All Processes, and go down to Grexpert, which is right here. Click on that. And we see Grexpert has opened here. We're going to make sure this says checked for background extraction. You can leave denoising off and all the other ones here off, because those are going to come at a later step. 0.7 for smoothing is just the default. That's totally fine. I've never adjusted these at all. And all we're going to do is take the little triangle in the bottom corner and drag it and drop on the image of the helix. It's going to take a few seconds to think about its life choices and figure out what image it's going to produce for us. 99% of the time it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't. You have to just experiment with it. If it doesn't work, there are other ways to extract the background, but for this demonstration, we're just going to stick to what is simple and easy for everybody. So once it is done, it shows you a whole new image. You can see the old image here, the new image here. This is not going to change a whole lot, to be honest, because the image that I captured this with was from Bortle 1, so there really isn't a lot of a gradient in the background anyway. But if you're from light pollution, or honestly, a lot of the data that I take on a nightly basis, that image that it produces will be vastly different than the first image in terms of gradients. So keep that in mind. This is kind of like a little magic tool. And once you're done here, you just hit the X, get rid of it. You can also minimize the original image, because now we don't really need to worry about that. But just in case something horribly goes wrong, keep it in the background just in case. The next step in the process here is we need to color calibrate this image. Now there's two different ways we can approach color calibration. We can go in here to Process, and we can do just a color calibration there with that module, or you could do it a more scientifically accurate way. And if you download all of the Gaia star catalogs from the PixInsight website and install those correctly, you can solve the image instead, where you would put in the object name or catalog number and the type of filter that you're using, and it will calculate the correct color calibration that you need for your specific image. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use this color calibration module because it's just drag and drop easy. But if you want more accurate color calibration, I do recommend downloading the Gaia Star catalogs and going through that way of doing it. So with just regular color calibration, you'll see here that it says the reference image, which is this image, is the target image. This is the only image that we have up on the screen right now, so this is going to be the target image. You don't have to touch any of this besides just take that little triangle and drag and drop onto it, and the image is going to go dark like this, and that's okay. But what you're going to have to do now is the reason why I said to keep this screen transfer function open, double click it, bring it back up, is you're going to have to hit that alarm button one more time. But do you notice how the image color calibration changed between the two? So if we pull up that original image, you see how it was much more green, and now the image is a little bit more reddish and a little bit more pink and maybe a little bit of blue towards the center of the image there, and a lot of that green hue on the helix is now gone. This is because it color calibrated the image. Now that we've color calibrated this image, go ahead and minimize your screen transfer function again, and we are going to take the target image here and we're going to do blur exterminator. So Process, All Processes, and Blur Exterminator. I like to leave this on the default settings. I think the defaults are perfectly good enough for typically what I do on a daily basis. Keep in mind, Blur Exterminator is a little bit more dynamic than you think it is. It helps reduce the size of the stars. It helps correct the nebula and the structure of the deep sky target that you're taking. So by sharpening it, using a little bit of AI to enhance, clarity and definition. But it also has the ability that if your image is slightly streaky, the star is slightly blurred, let's say, in your total exposure, it has the ability to get rid of the streakiness and put the stars back to perfectly circular stars. So that is a really nice tool as well. But for this, we're just going to use default settings. And again, we can just take the triangle, drag and drop it over. It'll take a few seconds depending on the computer that you're using and the processing power that you have. And of course, how big the data file is, of course, that you're choosing to process as well. So it looks like it has finished over here. You can tell if we hit this little backwards button, you can see the size of the star is really reduced down with the before and the after. So now that we're done with Blur Exterminator, you can X out of it, and the next thing we're going to do is Noise Exterminator. We're going to get rid of all that noise. Now, one thing I do want to mention is when we talk about the circular noise and the noise issues that the Celestron Origin has, unfortunately, there's no way to just make a magic tool and get rid of all the walking noise in the Origin data. You have to use a third-party software with Origin Live View to kind of counteract the mount and kind of trick it into dithering itself to get successful images without any noise in them. But still to this day, Celestron still struggles with noise patterns in their images as of the end of October 2025. We still unfortunately deal with images like this one, for example, that just have lots of noise through them. This edit will try to alleviate as much of it as we can, but it'll never be perfect. So with Noise Exterminator, we're going to use the same type of tactic that we did with Blur Exterminator. Just default settings, drag and drop with the triangle, and let it run for a few seconds. This is where kind of the magic happens, because all that noise is just going to erase from this image. Just like that. If we, zoom in again, you can see here, before and after is just a huge difference in clarity. And now you can also look at the nebula and see a lot of the structure within the helix, which is really nice. Now, the only bad part is that circular noise is still right here and quite present. Hopefully we can sort of darken the background a little bit to make it go away or be hidden a little bit better than what it is right now, but we'll have to see as we progress forward. Once you're done with Noise Exterminator, just hit the X, same thing, just get rid of it. And the next step on the journey here is we need to now stretch the image. So if we go up here to the screen transfer function and we double tap this again, right now this image has not been stretched. So basically what that means is we can do all the things that we want to this image right now. And if we save it, it is just going to be a really dark image because it is not in a state that we get full resolution and detail out of this image. So the screen transfer function, though, is really only to preview the image. It is not going to stretch the image for us. And what I like to do is use the SETI Astro suite to stretch the image in a really easy to use script. But we have to pull up screen transfer function here, and we have to hit the button that resets everything, which is down on the right hand side here, this little square, 4 arrows pointing towards the middle. We're going to hit this and the image is going to go completely black. You'll still see some stars that are there in the background, but that's it. Now we can close the screen transfer function, and we need to go up here to Script and SETI Astro and scroll down to Statistical Stretch. This, for me, is one of the easiest ways to stretch your image if you haven't learned the more advanced techniques with PixInsight. So for this, we're just going to be using this really simple script to do the stretching. Basically, it gives you a good idea. 0.10 is a good start for distant objects like galaxies or planetary nebula, and 0.25 is a good start for images like nebula filling the image. So what that's talking about is the target median right here. So 0.25 is still a little bit bright. We're going to try it. We're not going to do any drag and drop, and you don't want to hit execute until we're ready to go on the final result here. So hit preview refresh. It'll show you the image of the nebula. And what we can do is if you take this slider, you can just keep hitting the refresh button and you can see all kinds of different ways the image looks. Now it says planetary nebula a 0.10. Well, a 0.10 to me is quite dark. This is really a dark helix nebula here. I wouldn't suggest something that low, so we're going to go up maybe to 0.20, see how that looks. I also don't want to stretch the noise also in the background too much either, because I want to try to keep that at bay. I think a 0.20 is pretty good for this particular target and this image exactly. So once you have it to where you feel like it looks really good to your eyes, you're going to hit the execute button and it is going to pop up the image over here. And now this is a fully stretched image. You can save this image just in the way that it is right now and you will get this image exactly on your desktop. All right, now that we have stretched our image, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to remove the stars from this image because we want to try to increase the planetary nebula a little bit, and we want to darken the background a little bit as well. So I'm going to go into Star Exterminator under All Processes, go down to Star Exterminator, and under Star Exterminator, we want to make sure that Generate Star Map has been selected. This is going to give us two separate images, one with the nebula by itself and the other one with just the stars. And the same thing, drag and drop the triangle right over onto our image. It's going to think about its life choices again, and it will present us with two different images here. You see one has just stars in the background and one has just our beautiful Helix Nebula. Now the problem is look at that noise, that circular noise that we cannot just get rid of, unfortunately. But we're going to try to do a little trick here and see if we can't get it to be really good. Once you're done with Star Exterminator, just go ahead and close it out. All right, now that we have these two images here, we're going to want to rename these just for really simple purposes. If you right-click on either of the images and you go to where it says Identifier, right here we can just put stars. That's what I do for my images. And then over here, I would identify this one as starless. So starless and stars, so we have the perfect combination here. And for right now, we're going to actually just minimize the stars themselves. We're just going to move it up here because we're not really going to be focusing on that too much, at least for the next couple of moments. For this image now of the helix, what I want to do is to create a mask. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to focus just on the Helix Nebula. So when we make the adjustments to the colors and the brightness and the darkness, it's only going to focus on the nebula itself for at least right now. We're going to then work on the background of this image by, again, using the same mask, but we're going to flip the mask. So let me show you how that's done. So we're going to go into Process, All Processes, and we're going to go down to where it says Range Selection. So range selection is how we start making a mask. To preview this, we're going to hit the little circular icon here. It's going to bring up this white screen for us. Now, the Helix Nebula photo is behind this white screen. We're going to change the lower limit here at the top. If we slowly bring the slider to the right, you'll see this image will start to change. There's our circular noise pattern. There's the helix a little bit. We want to get rid of it to where we just have basically just the helix here. So right about there is pretty good. Now, the problem is if we selected this as our mask, it would be a very hard edge, and we don't want that, when we're doing this. So we're going to come down here to smoothness, and we're going to drive that slider to the right, and you see how fuzzy that edge becomes for the Helix Nebula. Now this, of course, doesn't look like the Helix Nebula right now, but you'll understand here in just a second what we're doing. I like to do it about halfway. I don't like it to be a hard edge, but I don't want it to be so soft that we start bleeding into the background. So I like to go about halfway on the target. And with this, we just hit the square button in the middle, which is apply. And you can see it opened up a new image on the back. Now this preview here, we can close this preview and we can minimize this range selection tool for right now. And this is basically where our Helix Nebula, you see it kind of has a very similar shape here. And what we're going to do is to apply this range mask to our Helix Nebula shot so we can start manipulating things with a little bit more precision. Right over here to the left where it says range mask, you're going to click on it and hold your mouse and drag that over to right under where it says starless. And you see how it has that little square icon. Go ahead and drop it there. And now the whole background becomes red. This means that the mask is now active for the Helix Nebula itself. The background is going to be unaffected when we do these next couple of edits. Now for this, just go ahead and minimize this and put it up here underneath the range selection tool. I like to keep my desktop kind of clean when I'm in PixInsight because there's a lot of different tools and there's a lot of things that you could do to cluster up your desktop here. So now we're going to go into the curves transformation tool. So we're going to go into processes, curves transformation, and you see here it kind of looks like a little histogram chart. And these icons are all your different colors and settings. So red, green, blue, RGB as a whole. And then you have a luminance channel. You can, adjust the hue, the saturation of the image, and a few other things as well. What we're going to do is we're going to hit this little circular icon, which is going to bring up our preview. Now notice the preview does not look red because the mask is still active, but you're going to be editing the photo directly on the screen, even though the mask is still active in the background, but we're going to be able to edit it right in the front. So for this, we're just going to start out with RGB, and I like to make an S-curve. So click two different portions, top and bottom here on the chart. And of course, if you adjust these, you can see how it changes the Helix Nebula, this way, and if we go this way, and, etc. So we can very easily, ruin your image doing this. But all I want to illustrate is make your S-curve, and we want to increase the brightness of the Helix Nebula, but not too far that it goes white like that, where you blow out all the details. But we do want, a little bit of brightness to it. I think that's pretty good right about there. And then, of course, if you wanted to play with the contrast, you can kind of, make some of the other areas sort of pop out if you choose. Now, again, this is just a very basic tutorial on how to use this. Please experiment, use these tools, play around with it, make copies of your images, and just go crazy with different tools and techniques, because sometimes you'll find something that you really like, and maybe you want to take a more artistic approach. Maybe you want to make all the colors completely opposite to each other and just go Andy Warhol on it. I mean, that's totally up to you. These are your images, and it's your fun to have underneath the night sky and on your computer later when you do your processing. So I think this is pretty good for the brightness aspect of the Helix. What you're going to do is click the square button that gives it the OK to adjust the image. But the problem is with PixInsight, because the S-curve is still active, you noticed how it went white. To reset this, we're going to hit those 4 arrows there in the corner. It will go back to where we had it before. The only other thing I want to do in this specific image, just for this tutorial, is bump up the color a little bit. So we're going to hit the little S icon over here, which is saturation. And we're going to turn up the color just a bit. Now, obviously, you can go crazy like that. You can completely make it black and white if you'd like to. I want to go a little bit further to right about here, where we still get nice red, a little bit of the greenish blue in the center. And we'll address the green, because the green is not really true color. It should be a little bit more blue, but that's about the color I want it to look like. So again, I'll hit the square to let it edit the image. It shows you a preview if you did it again, but we're going to reset it back to just one iteration of that color boost. And for this portion, we can close this preview for right now. because we're going to be doing something now for the background. So your image now is edited. You can see that the color and the brightness have been changed, but now I want to edit the background of this image, no longer the Helix Nebula itself. I want to see if we can darken that background to get rid of some of that noise. So what we're going to do is right-click on this, and we're going to go to Mask, because we created that mask, that red mask there that's on the back, and we're going to hit Invert the mask. So now you see the Helix Nebula is selected, but the background is now what is active for us to be able to edit. So if we go back over here to our Curves tool, we open up our Preview tool. We now want to change it though from saturation because we don't want to change the color anymore. We want to go back to RGB as a whole and do the same S-curve, but now we can darken that background and you see that noise kind of fades away. Now, the thing to remember with the background, some people like the background to be completely jet black. And some people like myself like it to be just a hair bit on the gray side, only because every time I look through a telescope, you'll notice the background is never pitch black. So my interpretation of my astrophotography is I like to have the background to have just a little bit of light to it. And that's just personal preference. You edit this image the way you want it. Unfortunately, though, for the noise, because the noise is so extreme, we're going to have to make that background quite dark on this image. So we are going to have to pull it down almost to the very end just to get rid of that noise pattern. You can, of course, play with the S-curve, play with both the bright and the dark range of the image, though, to get the background that you want the most. And so now I think that's pretty good for the background. I want to hit the square and hit the reset button. There is our image. You can see the helix is quite colorful and bright, and the background now is nice and dark. So we can close our Curves transformation tool, and we can close our preview, and the mask is still going to be active on our image. To just get rid of that, we're going to right click and go to Mask again, and we're just going to hit Remove Mask, and there is our image of the helix. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to bump up the color of the stars a little bit, because obviously the stars have pretty colors too. Why not add a little bit of color to them? So with the stars image, double click on that. You can see here's our image of the stars that we have. If we go into that same Curves transformation tool, I don't know why I closed it. I didn't think about this, but that's all right. Forgive me. If we go in here and again, we just hit S for saturation. I am just going to do it by eyeball. You can, of course, use the preview and do it yourself, but I just want to increase it just a little bit for the saturation of the stars. Nothing crazy, just a little curve like that on the saturation. Hit reset and close our tool. Now we have a little bit more color in these stars. You can kind of see now, instead of them being a little bit more pale, they're a little bit more yellow. That's the after, before, and after, before, and after. We can see a little bit of change in the color of the stars. Now, typically, when you have your two images here, your stars and your star list, the easiest way to recombine them is usually in Pixel Math, and you are going to go in there and type in a code line, and it will recreate the image for you. Myself, I use Lucomatico's quick icons here, which is really simple. You'll see one says starless for rescreening and the other one says stars for rescreening. So the starless one, you're going to click and drop on the nebula photo or the galaxy photo, whichever you're using for your starless image. Drag it on there. You see it created another image. This does that by default. Just move this kind of out of the way a little bit. And then this one is stars for rescreening. Same thing, drag and drop on our star image only. It will create a star image like that. And then the third one is rescreen starless and stars. And if you just drag and drop this on the same star image, voila, there is our final image of the Helix Nebula that we have created. Now you'll notice the background looks pretty good. A little bit of that noise is still there, but it's really not that noticeable compared to what we were in the beginning. I mean, look at the original image here from all that noise in the background to almost noise-free. But the difference in the nebula itself, we have really a beautiful image of the Helix Nebula here. There is one more tool I wanted to show you before we finish with a star reduction for the end of our image post-processing here. And that is the tool of SCNR. You can go into Process and scroll all the way down to SCNR here. And this allows you to kind of not rebalance the image in terms of color, but get rid of certain color hues. So whenever we look at this image of the Helix Nebula, I myself can notice that there's a little bit of green in here, and this is not natural color. The center of the helix is traditionally a little bit more blue. So in order to fix this, SCNR is a really good tool. And you can use SCNR in anywhere from the workflow. So you can use it right before you stretch the data. You can use it after you've done a couple adjustments with curves. You can do it at the end of the image like this if there's been a little bit of green hue that has, made its way into the image or not. So what we're going to do is color to remove is going to be green. You could also do red or blue, but typically SCNR is only used for mostly green. We're going to keep just the average neutral. Now, the 1.0 could be a little bit too severe. Sometimes if you have a little bit of green and you apply the SCNR, it'll turn almost purple, so that's a little bit too far. So for this one, I'm going to try maybe just halfway. Again, drag and drop. And you can really see there, that center of the helix, look at the before and after. It went from green to blue. And even the reds became just a little bit more orangey. And now that is the image that I like to capture of the helix. I like the center to be a little bit on the more blue side. SCNR, then, we can just close it out. And a lot of people like to do a star reduction to close out their workflow. Some people don't really want to. They can, you can just save it as it is right now on the computer screen, of course. It's a beautiful image of the helix. I would be more than happy to print that and put that on my wall myself. But if you do want to reduce the stars a little bit, Bill Blanchin has a script for that. Again, I'll link all of these in the description. But if we go over here to Script under Utilities and Star Reduction, you'll see that Bill Blanchin's star reduction script here, it's using the rescreen result that we have here, and then the starless view that we had. You can select the type of method. I just typically use star method. Mode, soft, moderate, and strong. I just leave it on soft. And the amount of iterations you want it to do. If you notice the background stars, as I do all 3 iterations, you can see they get kind of just lost in the background. You don't want to do too much because then, of course, you lose your stars and they look kind of weird. But typically a soft and 1 iteration is good enough for me. And then make sure under the output options, you check mark create new reduced image, just so that if you wanted to save both the non-reduced and the reduced, you'll have both copies available to you. And you can see it created a new image behind here. We can get rid of this. Get rid of this, and here is our new star reduced image of the helix. You'll notice a little bit of difference between the two. The one on the right is not reduced and the one on the left is. The helix looks a little bit more pronounced on the one to the left, just a little bit. And that's because whenever you reduce the size of the stars down a little bit, you kind of create this 3D effect where the nebula itself is not affected, so it's still bright and colorful and, ready to go. And it's the main feature in the image, right? And so when you reduce the stars down just a little bit, you kind of create that 3D effect. But certainly, either one of these images that you save and show off to your friends and family, I'm sure they will still be very impressed with the image that you've captured of the helix. Now, from this point forward, you can just go up to File and Save As, and save it exactly as you choose. I'm just going to do it as a TIFF file just to maintain full resolution. And From there, that is all there is to post-processing your origin data. I hope this was easy enough for you to follow along. I am certainly no professional when it comes to PixInsight. There's a lot of tools I do not know how to use, and I'm learning new things each and every week. And the workflow that you do is going to change 50 times between now and a year from now, just because you're going to learn new ways to stretch data. You're going to learn new ways to enhance nebula detail. You're going to learn new ways to, color calibrate, and all kinds of things are going to change and adapt as you learn more and more advanced techniques. But I hope this helps you learn how to process your origin data to produce really nice images that you are proud of. And until next time, I wish you all the clear skies and happy imaging. Thank you so much for joining again. I'll see you in the next video.